where Hashem says to Moshe to tell the Bnei Yisrael that we should tithe our possessions to designate a portion for Hashem, which is referred to Truma. The reason why Truma is referred to as Truma, Lahari means to lift up, to raise up. Me'ez kol ish asher yidvenu libo. From each person who gives due to the generosity of his heart, the willingness of his heart, tikkos trumasi, only that person qualifies that his truma is acceptable. If one forces him, one compels him to give the truma, it's not acceptable. This is a prerequisite in the material that's needed, regardless what it is. It has to be given out of the goodness of the person's heart. Yidvenu libo. Rashi says, Loshen davu, Loshen rotzen tov. I'm giving it willingly. V'zo truma. This is the truma. I mean, what are the materials which are needed? Asher tikkum itom, that you should take from them. Zov or chesed v'nechoshes. Gold, silver, and copper. So over here, if you take a look in the Seforno, I mentioned this yesterday, it's not that they would raise money and they purchase the materials that are needed, but rather the materials that are given, the materials themselves are the materials that are used to build the Mishkan. The Shekhinah, the divine presence, will dwell in the materials that they themselves actually donated. It's not they should collect that value. Go Perus and Margolius, they should actually collect fruits and pearls, Avonim Tovas, diamonds, Shein Ba'avni Efo, the Choshen, precious stones which don't go into the breastplate. The tithe which they received is that tithe actually becomes part of the Mishkan itself. And it's the 13 materials which are delineated in this statement over here. So the materials, the metals are Zov, Chesed, Nechoshes, gold, silver, and copper. Now, if you remember, we mentioned in Parshas Bereishis, when God created existence, the 4 exiles are alluded to. The Torah describes what was the setting before the world developed into what it is today, which was after the 7 days of creation. It was tohu vavohu. It was unformed, chaotic, choshech al pnei tom, darkness over the deep waters. That's how the Torah describes the physical setting of the world at the very beginning. Tohu vavohu, v'choshech al pnei som. So the Midrash says over the Yalkut, Tohu is referring to Malchus Bavel. That's the Babylonian kingdom. That's the Babylonian exile. Vohu is Malchus Poras Modai, the Persian, the Medes. That was the story when the 70-year period. During that period, we were under the Persians. There's Achashverosh and the Medes, Modai. Choshech, darkness, Zeyovon. That's the Greeks. Shechoshchu eineim shel Yisrael b'gzeirusan. They blackened the eyes of the Jews due to their decrees. What was the decree that they had issued? That every Jew should write on Keren Hashor, that every Jew should write on the horn of an ox, Ein lanu chelek b'Knei Yisrael. We have no share in the God of Israel. That was part of the decrees of the Greeks. Tahom, the Edom. Tahom are the Edomites, Why it's called Tohom? Just as Tohom means the deep waters, it's unending waters. Identically, the exile of Edom is going to be the longest exile. They will destroy the second base of Mikdash, and we still haven't been extricated from that exile until the building of the third base of Mikdash, and that's what we say every day before Yishtabach. The redeemers will come and they will judge Har Esov, Mount Esov, and then they will be destroyed. Then God will be declared by all humanity, he will have the kingdom. So at the beginning of creation, we find that the four exiles are alluded to. This is integral part and parcel that they will have the time to dominate existence. We know that in the book of Daniel had a dream, and the four exiles are depicted in Daniel's dream in a various form. He sees Bavel. Daniel wasn't Bavel. He was during the period after the destruction of the first base of Mikdash, and he was a courtier in the court of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian emperor, and he saw Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians, as Rosha de Dahava, like a golden head. And the Persians were seen as Kesef. And the Greeks were seen as the Choshes. And then the Torah here says, Oros Elim Modomim. It's the Posukei. Ram's hides that were colored red, dyed red. What's Oros Elim Modomim? Is Edom. Edom are red. Esav was red. They're referred as red. So we find, so the Midrash says that these four metals, three metals and the hides, the dyed hides that were dyed red, represent the four exiles. It's interesting. Vosli migdash shachanti b'socham. Make for me a sanctuary that I should dwell in that sanctuary. That God's presence is in that sanctuary. And in that location, we have a representation of the four exiles, the four civilizations which subjugated the Jewish people in exile. Bavel, Poras, Yavon, and Edom. In that location. You'd say we're at two ends of the equation. One side you have the good, one side you have the bad, the evil. But this is the representation of the ultimate. These exiles are the antithesis of God's presence. They reject God's presence. And yet, in that location where God's presence lies, we have a representation of the four exiles. The Gemara tells us in Yuma that when the Jews rebuilt the second base of Mikdash, Danshe Knesset HaGedolah had come to realization that what ravaged the Jewish people during the majority of the first temple period was idolatry. And they decided they're going to destroy the evil inclination for idolatry. Originally, during the first temple period, the desire and the drive for idolatry was so overwhelming, it was more intense and more controlling than the sexual desire for a woman during the first temple period. And they decided they have to somehow destroy it. They fasted 100 fasts, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, the men of the High Assembly, and they were mispalel. They prayed that God should show them that inclination, its representation, and they will destroy it. So what happened? After they fast 100 fasts and they pray, all of a sudden they see a lion made of fire, a fiery lion coming out of the Kodesh Kadoshim, coming out of the Holy of Holies. They take it and they put it into a lead cylinder and they seal it, and they destroy it. As a result of that, the drive for idolatry is no longer there. I mean, a person can decide to be an idolater, but a person's not consumed with the drive to become an idolater, as existed during the first temple period. Could you imagine? From where did the fiery line which represented idolatry, it exited from the Holy of Holies. And when it exited the Holy of Holies, they tackled it, they put it into this lead cylinder and destroyed it. The Holy of Holies, the ultimate. But yet the power, the spiritual power, as we speak about the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, it's a spiritual power which controls and draws us and tugs us away from what we should be. It was created by God. The inclination was created by God, but it's coming at a Holy of Holies. The answer is everything. We're all on equal footing. Everything emanates from Hashem. And it has the same, as the Rambam writes, Hilchos Tshuva. Every human being is put in a position exactly in the center. We have a choice. You go right, you go left. So therefore, we have to be on equal footing. The Holy of Holies, everything emanates from there. Good, all evil. It's representation. Emanates, it happens only because it emanates from God's presence. And therefore, when they built the Mishkan, the materials that were used, Zov, Kesef, Nechoshes, and Oros, Elim, Modomim, which the Modom, the red dyed hides, ram's eyes, represents Edom. That's Esov. Because again, that's the location of Hashem's presence. You have to have a representation of the four exiles in the Mishkan. That was the first time that God returned on a semi-permanent basis that his existence should be on the terrestrial level. As the Gemara says in Megillah, at the beginning of Parshas Shmini, Voya b'yom hashmini, just as the beginning of creation says, Vayi'er vayivoker, it says b'yom, that the joy that God had when he created existence, that same joy took place when the Mishkan took on a permanent level. Why? Because what was the original intent of creation? That God's presence should be on the terrestrial level, not on the celestial. But because Adam had sinned, therefore he had to withdraw from this existence. From that time till the permanence of the Mishkan, God's presence wasn't here. When did it return to the terrestrial level? That it should be here on this semi-permanent level. On the 8th day, when the Mishkan was inaugurated, took on that permanent state. Therefore, the joy was at that level. So that's God's presence. As a result of that, as a beginning of creation, as I said, that in existence, part of existence are the four exiles, the representations, the four civilizations, Tov, Avo, Choshech, Alpnei Sahom, identically the Mishkan, which is again God's presence. It's the equivalent, it's a microcosm of creation. You have a representation of the four exiles, Zov, Kesef, and the Choshes, and Oros, Elim, Modomim.